St. Paul, The Fan.
Right now, you can go to KFAN.com, keyword watch Nordo live, courtesy of Quantum Fiber. KFAN.com, keyword watch.
And what a sight that is to see day after a holiday. Thanks for checking in. KFAN.com/watch. Joining me on the Connecticut Water Systems hotline, John Krasinski. I believe you're on your way back from vacation. I know you wrote a terrific article on the Anthony Edwards extension that just took place about 36 hours ago or so. But how was your fourth? And thanks for giving me some time today, brother.
Yeah, Nordo was nice. Got a couple of days at the brother-in-law's cabin. So it's not my cabin, which is always the best. You can just kind of show up and freeload, and that's what I do better than most people in town, I believe. So did that, got in the lake a little bit. Did some tubing, did some barbecuing, and now I'm ready to go barbecue myself in Las Vegas at Summer League for the next 5 days, starting this evening. So.
Yeah, and you wrote that piece, and by the way, you're right. Never own a cabin, just know somebody who does, and then you can just take advantage of all of that. Any fires during the barbecue that erupted due to maybe misuse or bad cooking? Did any flames get up while you were barbecuing?
Thankfully, no. We did have, we did the old bonfires at night, and and did some s'mores there, and we kept it managed. We kept it within the fire pit, so that was good. And then we do a lot of the grilling on a Blackstone. So I think that's a little bit less of a fire hazard than a charcoal grill or something like that. And so all was safe. We didn't have any burns, any catastrophes or any fire department calls. So we call that a win for sure.
Yeah, the next time you're in studio, if you ever want to know how to turn a 1940s era propane smoker into a bonfire, I can just hook you up with Chad Abbott, and we can all figure that out and learn together. Now with learning together here, John, at John Krasinski, JONKRAWCZYNSKI, via Twitter. The Athletic piece, a cool thing for Ant, kind of stamping him as the face of the franchise. But I love the way that you had to do it, John. You kind of started things out in your piece with history not being on his side. Do you think Ant knows that, or is he's ready to go sky the limit?
Yeah, I think he knows it, and I think he likes it, Nordo. Obviously outside of the Kevin Garnett era, the Wolves have been largely a dumpster fire, largely dysfunctional, certainly not very successful. And, Ant is the kind of person, I think, who enjoys that type of challenge. In the piece, we talk about how when he was in AAU ball, he didn't take the invitation to the Nike EYBL circuit, kind of the glamour one. He went with the more under-the-radar underdog Under Armour circuit. When he went to college, he didn't go to Kentucky, which he had a chance to do. He went to Georgia, a team that is known for football and not a lot for basketball. Now he's here with the Timberwolves, and they are not the Lakers. They are not the Celtics. They are not, some of the league's glamour franchises. And I think that there's something that appeals to him about being able to be the guy who helps this team break through, like Giannis did with the Bucks, like Steph did with the Warriors, like, even like Chris Paul did with the Clippers, where they didn't win a championship, but he certainly remade an organization that was known for losing into an organization that was at least relevant in the Western Conference. And so I know that Ant understands that, and I think that he relishes the opportunity to do something that so many others have tried to do over the last 15, 18 years and just haven't been able to accomplish.
Steady growth statistically during his time here with the Wolves, playoffs. And I guess one way that I've kind of framed it up over time is if there's anything for me that I would ever question about Ant, and maybe this plays into him really taking the mantle and a stronghold of this organization, is emotional maturity. Do you find that along with the stats and along with him, in my opinion, rising to the occasion and unfortunately kind of being the lone star, at least in this most recent Nuggets playoff series, but do you find that the emotional maturity is showing the same arc of growth as his on-court basketball playing is?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that when you listen to teammates and coaches talk about his development over the course of the last couple of years here, they have steadily seen more of a willingness and an ability to be a vocal leader, to start to hold teammates accountable. You're seeing this summer he's spending more time in Minnesota than he has previously, and that's all kind of designed to really set a tone for the rest of the team and say, hey, why don't you come in here? So let's spend some time together. Let's play together. Let's practice together. Let's work out together. And so I think that now that he has this contract, now that he has even more of the status, now that he has some of the playoff performances on his resume, it's going to make it easier for him to sort of take control and take charge of this organization. When he first came in, he's like, this isn't my team. This is Karl Anthony Towns' team. This is D'Angelo Russell's team. He was deferring to veterans, deferring to people who knew more than what he did. And I think over the last 3 years now, he's accumulated a little better feel for the league, for his team, for the organization, for how to take control and take charge. And so I think you see an even more assertive Anthony Edwards going forward. Now, he's still 21 years old, Nordo. Like, he's still good. He's still a kid, figuring all of this stuff out. But we have seen a lot of signs that he certainly has the sort of quality that people want to get behind and want to follow.
John Krasinski of The Athletic, theathletic.com at JONSKRAWCZYNSKI via Twitter. Now, his relationship with Finch, and I think you've written on it, you've talked to me, or whether it's Barrero, just kind of noting, Finch, I think there's a connection there. I think that there's a mutual respect there, and I think I've even seen him going to other playoff games and such together. So, that's, how good is that for Anthony? And really, in some ways, how good is that for Chris Finch as he looks to extend his tenure here as head coach?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the latter is definitely more important. I mean, the way of the world in the NBA right now is that players essentially run the show. There are a few places that is not the case, but most of the league, if your star player isn't on board with the head coach, it's the head coach that loses that battle. So the good thing for Chris Finch is that Anthony Edwards does trust him, does have faith in him, does listen to him and follow him. And I think the most key and crucial part of all of that is that Anthony Edwards is one of those players who doesn't mind getting yelled at, who doesn't mind getting called out in a film session, who doesn't mind getting coached really hard. Chris Finch has said that time and time again over the first couple of years that he's worked with them, is that the biggest advantage that Anthony Edwards gives him is he allows Chris Finch to coach him. And that may sound like, well, what do you mean? Like that should be the case always. It's not always the case. Like, there are some times where coaches really have to walk on eggshells, really have to be careful. Anthony Edwards is not one of those guys. And so when your head coach can coach, your most important player the way that he does with Anthony Edwards, then it's harder for Josh Minot, for Wendell Moore, for anyone else to kind of complain about Finch getting on them. We say, hey, Ant lets me get on him, so you can let me get on you too and push you and prod you. And so that's kind of the biggest and most important dynamic of that relationship, is just the way that Anthony Edwards absorbs coaching and does not take things personally when he's called out for doing something wrong.
And let me ask an aside to that. I'm going to ask you a bunch of stupid questions until eventually you're like, I'm done with this. I just want to go home and hang out with my family, and you hang up on me. But in terms of the league, so Anthony, it's Tyrese Halliburton and it's Desmond Bane, and it's LaMelo Ball. All same draft class have all signed these. Now, when it comes to whether it's the coachability or players leading the mix here. In the end, the guy that just got paid $260 million, he has a pretty important say in organizational dynamics. But, is there anything worrisome about, when I look at whether it's Ant, I'm looking at Halliburton, I list these names, Bane and LaMelo Ball, is you're putting them in those spots, really at least in those four cases, even Ant, and I love Ant, you're putting them in these spots before any of them have truly shown you that they're completely ready for the spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you're definitely wish casting a little bit here. You're trying to project where these guys are going over the next few years, and that they are going to be the guys who do rise up and become true franchise players, because there isn't a whole lot of evidence to support it. Now, I think where the Wolves feel comfortable doing this with Anthony Edwards is you have seen him in the playoffs just really accelerate his game. And just the fact that he has been in the playoffs in his last 2 seasons and 2 of his first 3 seasons makes him wholly unique in Timberwolves lore going back to 2004 and really in the post Kevin Garnett era. So you have seen some signs that he is able to impact winning at that, at that level. Certainly Desmond Bane has played a big role in that in Memphis. They've been the 2 seed. Like they've actually won playoff series. So you feel good about that. LaMelo Ball, I think, is definitely a much bigger question mark in terms of, does he really impact winning? Is that a guy you hitch your wagon to that degree? Halliburton, I really, really like, and I want to see a little bit more of. But I would say that of this crop of major max contract players, the Wolves really feel comfortable in doing this with Anthony because they've just seen how well he plays in big moments and pressure spots, and they think that's only going to get better here as he gets older and wiser and maybe in a little better shape and all of the other things that they expect to come over the next couple of years here.
So naturally, whether it's AAU ball, it's rec basketball at a community center, et cetera, with any team, there's always going to be really almost a naturally built hierarchy. It's usually the best kid. Sometimes it's the best player, or sometimes it's the smartest player as you get up the ranks of professional hoops. But in the end, talking about the idea of really kind of giving the keys, and I've heard Tim Connolly talk about, we're going to do what we can around Anthony. Well, the last guy that they wanted to build around still here. So how does that work in terms of, and I guess, I don't know if did Cat ever look at this as being his team? Did he ever put it on his shoulders and say, this is my bid? I feel different personality structures in that mix too. Like, what's that dynamic like between Ant and Carl?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, Cat absolutely saw this as his team. He's going into his 9th year. He's been the number 1 pick. They've really done a lot around him to try and accommodate him. The Rudy Gobert trade withstanding, a lot of the other moves, whether it's coaching, whether it's general manager, whether it's teammates, it's been trying to find the right mix around Carl. And a lot of people around town especially are harder on Carl than I am. I think that Carl has been a victim of a lot of the turnover, the constant turnover in this organization in the leadership positions. But the bottom line is he has not been one to be able to transcend that stuff and to really get the Timberwolves to kind of get out of their own way. And then you look at what he's done in the playoffs, and it leaves a lot of wanting for the Timberwolves, and they want to see more from their franchise player. Now, the good news is that Carl and Anthony get along very, very well. I think that Carl really respects Ant. I think he sees the potential in Anthony to really be a rocket ship and kind of take this thing higher. And I think Anthony does a really good job of interacting with Carl and making sure that he does not feel either left out or pushed aside or any of that nature. And so the two of them, from a relationship standpoint, are on really good footing. The only question that you have going forward about whether they stay together is just purely financial. Like, can the Timberwolves afford over the long term to keep Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert together? That's going to be the question, much more so than any basketball or personality or things like that. This is not Carl and Jimmy, who did not get along at all. Carl and Ant really get along. They spend time together. They enjoy each other's company. They know that they help each other. And so that part of it shouldn't be particularly difficult to navigate. It's just going to be the finances in the end, whether they can do that or not.
I like that. A couple more for you, and I'll let you get on to enjoy the day here. So with that said, they like each other, and you mentioned the financial aspect of it. So running it back, that's been the common term used. And then also, just the team, I think, has really been steadfast in the fact that, we're moving forward with this core group. Here's what we got. We got Ant, we got Rudy, we got Carl. So all of that considered, the running it back part of it, do you think in some ways they already know? I watched Carl miss 50 games last year. So now it's kind of, well, let's see what year 2 could look like. The chemistry of Cat and Rudy on the court at the same time. They kind of already know what they're going to get out of that, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think they do have a good feeling, and I think that they're a lot more confident in it than a lot of people around the league, quite frankly. And I mean, when you look at what their decision-making process is, and in the high likelihood that they run it back here, some of that, a lot of that has to do with they want to show the rest of the league that they knew what they were doing in putting those two together, Carl and Rudy, and the belief that they have that they can make things work, especially offensively, to a higher degree with greater familiarity, with greater health, all of those things. The other thing, though, Nordo, let's just say, like, for the sake of argument, that they look at the writing on the wall and say, man, this is going to be a big financial burden to carry over the next several years here. Second apron this, first apron that, blah, blah, blah. I still think that there is a possibility that because Carl is coming off of an injury-plagued season, because he wasn't particularly great in the playoffs, he had a couple good games and several stinkers, I don't know that his value is the highest right now. Is this the time that you want to part with Karl Anthony Towns for a lower return than maybe if he comes back and maybe he plays really well, he's healthy, the team clicks a little bit more, then maybe you're dealing from a position of strength. And so strategically, it makes sense to run it back just as much as it does basketball-wise. And I'm saying that knowing that this team really has kind of a belief that the basketball part of it just never got off the ground last season, and they really believe that it can work that way.
We feel sometimes like we're on the outside of just the coolest party in the world, and we're just sitting up there fogging up the glass from the outside. Just wish, how could we get in on the glitz and the glamour of the trade market and free agency and all of those things. So when Portland's hitting us with, Damian Lillard, finally we're going to try and consummate a trade, and then somebody throws out there on Twitter that the Timberwolves have made a phone call. I mean, you know what that does to the meat sauces of society. I mean, it's apocalyptic. Now, are the Timberwolves doing those sorts of things? I guess what does John Krasinski with his ear to the ground find when he's looking for the answers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they absolutely were checking in on it, but I think they are one of 27 teams in the league that call the Portland Trailblazers, because when a player as good as Damian Lillard becomes available at a position of need, even though the Wolves have Mike Conley, Damian Lillard's a better player than Mike Conley. So they would be stupid not to call and see what it would take to get it. What is Portland's asking price? Now, we all know the complications with Dame seemingly wanting to play for Miami and trying to steer his way there, but quite honestly, I don't know that Miami has anything worth offering to Portland that would be good enough to take to part with literally the best player that they've ever had in franchise history. And so I do think that, yes, the Wolves looked into it. I don't think that there's anything to it right now. I think that they are not special or unique in looking into it. I know that the tweet was put out 4 or 5 teams have at least inquired. I can tell you it's been at least 25 teams that have inquired about Damian Lillard and what it would take. That's just a player that good is going to command that kind of attention. But I have a hard time finding a match for a deal right now with Portland, especially given that Portland should rightly be asking for the moon and the stars for Damian Lillard. Yes, the Wolves have Cat. They could offer that if they wanted to, but I think that the Blazers would want to look more forward and have a bunch of draft picks and try and go that way. If you're going to tear down and rebuild, you might as well tear all the way down and rebuild. So all that is to say is, do I think that they made a call? Yeah, they probably did make a call and just check in, because that's what every team should do in this situation. But I've been told, over the last couple of days that the plan remains to run it back. I just don't think that there's much there. There wasn't anything there during the draft, and I don't think there's anything there right now. Things can change quickly. That's what always happens in this league. But as of right now, that's where things stand. It's status quo. They're planning on going to training camp in October with this group largely intact, and Naz Reid, another one, getting introduced today in a press conference for his big deal. So they're rolling that way.
Hey, can't thank you enough for always finding a way to make yourself available, whether it's here 9 to noon. You're fantastic with Barrero. The Saturday show, we'll ask you about completely impossible trades and try to have fun. You're awesome, man. Safe travels back from vacation, and we'll chat again soon, all right?
Always good times, Nordo. Thanks, man.
Thank you. That's John Krasinski of The Athletic at JONKRAWCZYNSKI. I got to say it that fast, otherwise I forget. John Krasinski on Twitter. The Athletic covers the Wolves, NBA. I don't want to call it a grind, but he doesn't get to take much of a chill as he heads down to Las Vegas pretty soon. Vegas Summer League. And we're going to get to watch that first round. We're going to get to watch a couple of second rounders and maybe have some fun talking about off-season hoops. Final couple of segments. There is something that Johnny stated I want to dig into. Your text messages, 64686. Bradshaw and Bryant text line, the inbox booth at KFAN.com, whether it's on the Wolves. There's a couple of Vikings talkers from early on and with Florio that I want to revisit as well. But it's Nordo in for PA on a Wednesday after the holiday. I hope everyone had a terrific 4th. Everyone got the fireworks out of their systems. Everyone grilled. No tragedies like what happened maybe somewhere in rural Nebraska over the weekend, and that everyone had a blast. And now we're back at it on a Wednesday. Thanks for hanging out.
KFAN, The Fan.
Looks like Brett Blakemore was listening to text messages 64686 in the Bradshaw and Bryant inbox because the 90s pop punk was not playing well with the masses on a Wednesday. So we got to go classic once in a while, 9 to noon. Nordo in for PA. PA out until Monday. Vocal maintenance galore. There's no doubt about that. But he's earned it. No days off during the football season. We're 20 days away from Vikings training camp. Getting back into this from the time with John Krasinski, finding ways to make this core work, and that kind of playing off of maybe some of the frustrations and things that we as Wolves fans had a year ago, jumping into your text messages, that trade Cat. Just do it. Get on the hotline with Portland right now and say, hey, we'll take Dame, you take Cat, and however that, I don't even know how the salaries match up. They got to be pretty damn close. I think it's 45 for Dame, and Cat certainly in that area. We still have one more year before it jumps to like 60 or something like that. But in the end, we're taking on a little more salary. Would we be so bold as to think we could get an additional draft pick? Start to recoup some of those picks that we lost in the Rudy Gobert trade? Is it that easy right now? What's the mood in the league for Karl Anthony Towns? And some of that plays into what's their mood on Cat's mood. Watching how he has handled himself over the course of time. Missing 50 games last season. I mentioned his three-point percentage took an absolute just pile drive off the top rope down to 36%. He was taking maybe just over an extra 3 a game than he did a year ago in those 29 games we actually got to see him play. But this is where the questions from Wolves fans dip into this. And this is where I begin to be skeptical. Now, there's skeptical while being logical. There's also skeptical while wearing tinfoil on your head and running around, wondering maybe the earth is really flat. And how the hell did they get that moon base up there and we can't see it? What I mean with my skepticism is there a stubbornness or just an absolute blind commitment to trying to make this thing work with Cat and Rudy? That's why I asked Johnny. And Johnny knows this. Johnny's plugged in. Don't you think that Finch and Connolly and everybody associated with this, they already know whether this Rudy thing or Cat thing is going to work? We wanted to see 80-plus games in a playoff series with it. We only got to see 29 in 5 games against the Nuggets. They didn't need all 80. They know whether this thing's going to work or not. And there's the stubborn commitment based on the investment that you made to Rudy Gobert. This has to work. This has to. My tenure as Pobo, if I'm Tim, this has to freaking work. And in some ways, as Pobo, you know what? If I'm going down with this ship, so is Finch. So guess what, Chris? You got to make it work. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to ingest some life into this thing. We have an opportunity to. We love the kids, so we're going to re-up Ant. And I love the idea of him being the energetic force, the leader there, and the leader on the court as well. I think he has the mental drive to do it. By all accounts, he said the right things. And talking about it earlier during the first hour, the emotional maturity, it does appear to be on the same arc as his evolution as a player. And that's a positive thing. And this is all the while I'm still analyzing, as Johnny did, in some ways kind of set me straight. I am trying to analyze a 21-year-old. So from an emotional maturity standpoint, certainly miles to go, but maybe miles he's already gone in that respect. So the stubbornness, you got to make it work because of the investment. This kind of loops into that TJ Hawkinson conversation. You have to re-sign TJ Hawkinson because you gave up a second-round pick to get him. Well, when's the right time to walk away from a bad deal? If you re-sign TJ, and I love TJ, but is TJ a $14 million a year tight end? Well, if we re-sign him, we'll just make him one. That's the cost of doing business in that particular market. And I can't find it. Maybe Brett can hop on the old Google machine and find the article. But PFT did a bit. And Travis Kelce, where Kelce, he acknowledged I'm underpaid. That was kind of like 2 things from Kelce last week. We learned a lot from Travis Kelce. Is that everyone smokes weed in the NFL, which I that's fine. That's all good with me. Just stop testing for it. Stop doing the obligatory off-season bit. Now, you really have to be dumb to be told when something is and still screw it up, but all the same, just move on from it. I like how the NBA, I believe, has done that. But Travis Kelce, everyone smokes weed in the NFL, and I know I'm underpaid, but I'm cool with that because I'm winning championships. 5 consecutive AFC title games, 3 Super Bowls. He's housed 2 of them, most recently, of course, over the Eagles. All NFC fans, Vikings fans rejoice. But when you're not winning, you're just another guy out there. Shorter careers in the NFL, you want to get paid while you can. And so whether it's we've talked about Kirk trying to take a deal, TJ's got to get paid. But is TJ worth the $14 or $15 million a year? It's all going to be how it gets framed up in the offense. Kelsey's cool with it. He's got ring cred. He knows that he's more productive than 2/3 of the wide receivers, if not more, in the NFL. But he's happy making that $10, $11, $12 million because he gets to play with Patrick. He's never going to buy a beer. He's never going to have to buy barbecue in Kansas City. And if he's not a legend already, he appears to be like he's well on his way to Canton at some point. So again, the stubbornness of making a plan work because of the investment. That's where I have my tinfoil hat on. That's where I'm looking for moon bases and mermaids. I believe that there's more substance to that than there is substance to the idea of this thing working in the long term. I'd love for it to work. All the jokes aside about Carl living in a different universe, a different plane of existence, a different dimension of reality, he's an incredible offensive player. I want that to work. I'm not interested in pushing people out of town with pitchforks. But there is such a stubbornness. This has to be the right answer. And again, it's going to be Anthony's team moving forward, and that for maybe some of us as fans is semantics. But functionally as a team, at least from my set of eyeballs, They're LASIK corrected, thanks to OVO. But I think I have solid enough vision to see this clearly. I thought Nas and Gobert worked as a much better tandem last year than Cat and Rudy did. And so now, how willing is Cat to change some of the aspects of his game? See, there's a lot of stubbornness going around here. The stubbornness of making an idea work, the stubbornness of sticking to your game. It will just come together. It just has to eventually. A lot of stubbornness in the mix as it pertains to how this thing looks with the Wolves right now. So running it back, the issue in the short term could be, well, the trade market for Cat. I thought that was interesting that he brought that up. Admittedly, that's one thing that I hadn't thought of. PA and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I referenced it earlier. Gleeman in studio, and, is Cat tradable at this point? Of course he is. People would love to have Cat on this team. There's change of scenery ideas. Again, there's the belief that I can change a person, or that a new scheme, a new coach, a new opportunity breathes life into a situation, the learning experience of being dealt, etc. But what would the market be? I don't think we're going to recoup what we would have lost or what we gave up for Rudy. But what would it take to satiate, to make you feel like, okay, now we can move on. Now we got some equity again. Now we got some maneuverability again. All of those things. The stubbornness of making an idea work, and then also the handcuffing of the market of the particular player that is so polarizing on this team. So it is absolutely the hardest of nuts to crack. And that jumps into, again, the different issues that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is dealing with the purple, is the stubbornness of a plan combined with how things look realistically when it's brought to fruition, whether it be with TJ Hawkinson, big year for him in this offense, playing on the fifth year option, and Kirk with all that dead money into 2024, last year of deal, probably should have sealed him up already if you actually wanted him to return. Now the prospect of him having a lights out year and going to free agency next spring, the stubbornness of ideas versus how the end result, the end product comes together is incredibly fascinating. And in both cases, we're going to learn quickly. New regime, new draft picks, new philosophies with the Vikings. We're not going to have to wait 5 years. By the end of 2023, I think we're going to have a very good idea how the plan laid out has been executed thus far. And I believe by the end of this next season, if we run it back, quote unquote, we're going to have a very clear picture of how Tim Connolly and the Wolves, how their framework, how their plans have been laid out and executed. And hopefully we're still on the rails and this train doesn't head into the ditch. Final segment, some of your text messages along with this as well. Continuing this talker and heading to the finish line here. Wednesday, Nordo in for PA. It's 9 to noon on The Fan.
It's The Fan.
Thanks to Brett Blakemore for producing 9 to noon. It'd be nice if he paid attention once in a while and just kind of executed his duties. But I adore Brett. I don't know what that dead air was. It was a dramatic pause to wrap up 9 to noon. To the text line, 64686. And maybe we can revisit this. I just got this really interesting text, by the way, about stand-up or chest freezers. Which is preferred? Do you want to have to dig into the bottom for that cow tongue you've been holding on to for 7 years? Do you want the upright? Do you just use the chest freezer as an additional place to stack junk in your garage? One of the great mysteries of life, one of the grand summertime talkers. Chest freezers or stand-ups? We could spend the entire show tomorrow. Ben Lieber in studio with me as well, in for PA. Thoughts on Ant and the Timber Pups? This is Shell, Shell in Lewiston. I believe Ant will continue to get better, will be all NBA for many years to come, barring injury. Okay, well, good. Me too, hopefully. It's his team, quote unquote. With that said, what are they going to do with Cat? Again, that kind of comes into last segment. But the key for him, and he notes it, is giving proper roles to both Nas and finding the best spot for Carl as well. 1 year down, it didn't work. Who's being more stubborn, the process or the player? That's for you to decide. Jake in Pine River. Love that Ant extension. You just have to be a fan of a kid that puts in the work. His growth, again, statistically, each and every year, that lends you to have that faith. As Johnny put in his article, faith, belief without proof. You have to believe that this ascension continues. He was once asked, what is the biggest change for you since moving to the NBA level? And his answer was not going out anymore. He wants to dedicate the time to getting bigger, faster, stronger, working his craft. It's awesome to see how much he wants to get better. Again, belief without proof, the faith in Ant continues. And I still love this one. Steve in Florida, they need outside shooting. When all of this is done, whether Cat works, whether Cat doesn't work, Ant continues to grow, all of those things. The next thing that we really didn't even talk about today, and I probably could have asked Johnny, is what the hell are we going to do at point guard? What are we going to do in that spot with the aging elder statesman in Mike Conley? And the fact that once we made the Rudy trade and decided that we were going to bring Stifle Tower here, the Frenchman. Once we were going to do that, we put a ton of faith, speaking of belief without proof, into Jalen Noel, and we put a lot of faith into three-point shooting on this team, and we struggled with that all season long. In a league, think about the contradictions of this 2022-2023 team. In a league where everyone was getting a bit smaller, we decided to go Twin Towers. In a league that hits a ton of threes, we couldn't hit threes. Our bench production was absolutely hideous. So again, after the conversation and the celebration for Ant goes away, and after the dust settles with Carl, in the end, somebody has to hit a 26-footer once in a while. And we don't have one of those guys. And the long-term point guard conversation continues. I love this. What do the Twins and our American Patriots have in common? They both took it to the Royals on the 4th of July. How about that? What a way to end 9 to noon today. Nordo in for PA. PA returns on Monday, fresh and at it. 20 days until Vikings training camp. You could tell that PA had some vocal maintenance under his belt on Monday as he fired 9 bullets of races at Canterbury Park. What festivities were out there? Final segment, by the way, when I don't do the raps, when Brett's producing and I'm in the big chair, the final segment is always brought to you by Casey's. And whether it's the 89-cent fountain and frozen drinks, medium size, 89 cents all summer long, check out the thin crust pizzas. Casey's Pizza is unbelievable. Yeah! And you got that at your fingertips as well. So all summer long, props to Casey's. Raps will continue when PA continues, but final segment brought to you by Casey's, here for good. Thanks to everybody with them. Thanks to you for listening. Tomorrow, Ben Lieber in studio and more. It's been 9 to noon on The Fan. Have a great afternoon.
Podcast today's Paul Allen Show, or listen back to previous show and
Come on, Brett.
by going to the iHeartRadio app